Most people walk into a Jiu-Jitsu class expecting young athletes, tough competitors, or seasoned fighters testing their skills. But no one that day expected to see an old woman step onto the mat, moving slowly, with a calm smile on her face. Whispers quickly spread across the room, and a few of the students chuckled under their breath. Some thought she had wandered into the wrong place. Others assumed she wouldn't last a single round. After all, what chance could an elderly woman possibly have against trained martial artists, let alone a black belt? But the woman didn't flinch. She tied her borrowed white belt with steady hands, ignoring the laughter. Her presence carried something different, an air of quiet confidence, as though she knew something everyone else in the room didn't. When the instructor asked for volunteers to spar with her, a tall black belt smirked and raised his hand, certain it would be a quick and easy match. Students leaned forward, phones discreetly ready to capture what they thought would be a funny moment. The old woman simply bowed, stepped onto the mat, and faced her opponent. The black belt grinned, already relaxed, while she stood rooted like a tree, unshaken. The room held a strange mix of doubt and curiosity. What happened next would silence every laugh, erase every doubt, and leave the entire class in shock. In just 10 seconds, the old woman would prove that strength isn't always about youth, and skill isn't always written on the belt around your waist. But before that moment arrived, no one in the room could have imagined how quickly the balance of power was about to shift. And it all began with the sound of the referee's call. Start! The moment the referee gave the signal, the black belt moved forward with a relaxed confidence. He was used to dominating new students, and he thought this would be no different. But the old woman didn't rush, didn't even flinch. She shifted her feet lightly, almost as if she had done this dance many times before. The students watching weren't sure what to make of it. Some laughed again, whispering that she looked too slow to even react. Others leaned in, sensing there was something unusual about her composure. She wasn't just another beginner walking onto the mat. Her eyes stayed locked on her opponent, steady and unblinking, as though she could see his movements before he even made them. The instructor, standing at the edge of the mat, tilted his head, noticing details the younger students missed. Her posture was balanced. Her stance was precise. There was discipline in her every step, something that didn't belong to a first-time white belt. Still, the black belt pressed forward, eager to make the match quick. He reached for her collar, expecting an easy grip, but in that split second the old woman shifted her weight and slipped free. It looked effortless, but it wasn't luck, it was skill. Gasps rose from the edges of the mat as students realized she wasn't panicking. In fact, she was calm. Too calm. Whispers grew louder now. Who was she really? Had she trained before? Was this some kind of setup? The atmosphere in the room shifted from laughter to curiosity, then to unease. The black belt's smile faded as he realized he might have underestimated his opponent. And just as the tension reached its peak, the old woman made her first decisive move, one that no one in that class would ever forget. The black belt tried again, this time with more focus. He reached for a sweep, expecting her to stumble, but the old woman countered with a subtle movement that left him off balance. The room grew quiet. Every eye was fixed on the unlikely match, and for the first time, some of the younger students felt a strange pull of respect for her. They had walked in thinking this was a joke, but now they were watching a mystery unfold right in front of them. The instructor folded his arms, studying closely. He recognized the mechanics in her movement, the small adjustments that only came with years of practice. Yet, no one at the gym had ever seen her before. The question hung in the air. Was she hiding her true rank, or was there a story behind why she wore that plain white belt? As the match continued, the black belt's frustration began to show. He wasn't losing yet, but he was no longer in control. Every time he reached, she slipped away. Every time he applied pressure, she redirected it. Around the mats, students whispered their theories. One thought she might have trained overseas. Another wondered if she was related to a famous martial artist. A few began to feel embarrassed, realizing how quickly they had judged her when she first walked in. But inside the match, the tension was sharper. The black belt, once confident, now fought with urgency, determined to prove himself. The old woman, on the other hand, moved with patience, as if she was teaching everyone in the room a quiet lesson without speaking a word. And then, just when it seemed like the match had settled into a strange rhythm, she shifted her stance in a way that hinted something big was about to happen. The class leaned forward, holding their breath, waiting for the moment that would change everything. The old woman lowered her weight, her movements sharp yet controlled, as if she had been waiting for this exact moment. The black belt, now visibly tense, circled her, his earlier grin gone. He lunged forward, gripping hard, determined to end the match quickly before his pride slipped any further. But the moment his hand touched her sleeve, she spun with surprising speed, her body flowing like water around his strength. Gasps filled the room as the black belt staggered, forced to retreat for the first time. No one laughed now. The whispers stopped. The only sound was the scuff of feet against the mat and the heavy breathing of a fighter who realized he was losing control. The students leaned in closer, eyes wide, watching something they couldn't explain. How could someone who looked so fragile move with such precision? Every small detail, her grip, her balance, her timing, showed the kind of mastery only hidden by years of discipline. The instructor's face grew serious. He had seen countless matches, but something about this one was different. It wasn't just a test of strength anymore. It was pride against patience, arrogance against wisdom. And as the black belt grew more desperate, the old woman remained calm, her breathing steady, her focus unbroken. Then came the moment that froze the room. With a sudden shift, she baited him into overcommitting, leaving just enough of an opening. The black belt lunged, convinced he had her cornered. For a split second, victory seemed certain for him. But in that same instant, her body coiled like a spring, ready to strike with a technique so fast that no one could predict what would follow. Every student held their breath, waiting for the inevitable clash that was about to decide everything. Just as the old woman prepared to unleash her counter, the black belt shifted in an unexpected way. Instead of following through with the opening she had given him, he pivoted sharply and went for a takedown most of the class had never seen him use before. It was faster, more aggressive, and carried the full weight of his frustration. The crowd gasped as he nearly caught her off guard, forcing her backward toward the edge of the mat. For the first time, it looked as though the balance of power might swing back in his favor. The tension inside the gym spiked. Some students whispered that maybe she had met her match after all. Others shook their heads, unable to believe what they were seeing. The instructor stepped forward, ready to intervene if things grew too dangerous, but he held back, curious to see how she would handle this sudden change. The black belt wasn't just fighting for pride anymore. He was fighting to prove that experience could not outshine youth, speed, and raw power. But the old woman didn't panic. Even under pressure, her eyes stayed clear, her movements measured. She let him press harder, almost inviting the attack. The students watched in disbelief as she shifted her footing just enough to absorb the force without breaking. It was like watching someone play chess 3 moves ahead, each step drawing her opponent deeper into her plan. Then came the second twist. Instead of breaking free, she leaned into the hold, allowing herself to be drawn into his strongest position. To everyone watching, it looked like she had made a mistake, like the black belt finally had her where he wanted. The room went silent, hearts pounding, as they braced for the outcome, only to realize the real trap was still waiting to be revealed. The black belt tightened his grip, certain the old woman had finally made a mistake. The students leaned forward, convinced the match was over. But in that single instant, everything changed. With a sudden burst of precision, she twisted her hips, shifted her weight, and reversed the position in one seamless motion. The black belt's body dropped, and before anyone could process what had happened, she locked him in a submission so clean and fast it left the entire room in shock. 10 seconds. That's all it took. The same students who had laughed earlier now sat frozen, their mouths open, staring at the black belt tapping frantically against the mat. The sound of his surrender, echoed louder than any cheer could. The old woman released him immediately, rising slowly with calm dignity, as if she had just finished something routine rather than shocking an entire class. The instructor stepped forward, stunned but smiling, and for a moment even he seemed unsure of what to say. The black belt sat on the mat, breathing heavily, his pride shaken more than his body. What had looked like an easy victory for him had turned into one of the most unforgettable lessons in the history of the gym. Just when the students thought the mystery was over, the old woman bowed respectfully and offered a quiet smile. Then, as if answering the question on everyone's mind, she spoke for the first time. Her words were simple, but they changed everything. I was training long before you were born. The revelation hit harder than the submission itself. She wasn't just a beginner in disguise. She was a master who had returned to the mat after years away. And in that moment, the class realized they hadn't just witnessed a sparring match. They had witnessed a reminder that true skill, once earned, never fades. The room stayed silent for a long moment after her words, as though everyone was still trying to process what they had just seen. The students who had laughed at her when she first walked in now looked down, embarrassed by their assumptions. The black belt, still catching his breath, finally stood and bowed deeply, showing her the respect she had earned in the most undeniable way. His pride may have been tested, but even he couldn't deny the lesson she had delivered in front of them all. The instructor stepped forward, finally breaking the silence. He smiled and asked her quietly about her past. She didn't share every detail, but she admitted she had trained for many years, then left the mats behind to raise a family and live a quiet life. Coming back was never about proving anything. It was simply about reconnecting with something she loved. That truth made the moment even more powerful. She hadn't returned for glory or recognition, but her skill spoke louder than words ever could. Around the room, the younger students began to realize the deeper meaning of what they had witnessed. Jiu-Jitsu wasn't just about strength, speed, or even youth. It was about discipline, patience, and knowledge passed through years of practice. The old woman had reminded them that belts and appearances don't always tell the full story. As the class ended, she tied her white belt back around her waist with the same quiet smile. To her, it wasn't about the color of the belt, it was about the journey. The students, however, would never see her as a beginner again. That day, they learned a lesson they would carry both on and off the mat. True mastery is timeless, and respect should never be judged by age or appearance.